Zimbabwe is endowed with many natural resources and tourist attractions. Tourism plays a vital role in international diplomacy. Hello and welcome to the Diplomatic Encounter. My name is Wendy Shoniwa. In the past decade, Zimbabwe has been portrayed in the international media as a bleak and dark place. For the better part of the decade, many people did not want to come and visit Zimbabwe because of what they heard on TV or what they saw. But many different people have come to Zimbabwe, including international music artists and soccer players. On the eve of the World Cup in 2010, the Samba Boys of Brazil visited Zimbabwe and played a friendly soccer match with our Warriors. International singing sensation Shakira came to the Victoria Falls. All these people have attested to the fact that Zimbabwe is a safe and peaceful destination. In 2013, Zimbabwe co-hosted the UNWTO with Zambia, which attracted thousands of people to the mighty Victoria Falls. Delegates who attended the UNWTO were able to send a clear message to the world that Zimbabwe is one of the safest destinations in the world. In May this year, the Zimbabwe Tourism Authority, ZTA, hosted the second edition of the Harare International Carnival, where many countries came to exhibit their different cultures. The carnival is mainly done to promote and celebrate cultural diversity. The countries which attended included South Africa, Brazil, Botswana, Ethiopia, Nigeria, just to mention a few. Zimbabwe has also been accorded 2 tourism awards by the European Council on Tourism and Trade. The General Assembly of the Council said Zimbabwe hosted the UNWTO in 2013 despite tremendous logistic and economic challenges. The Assembly said there is no doubt that the country has the capacity to organize top world events as it is a safe destination. It further says the country has done a lot in promoting ecotourism, leading to a lot of community support in the preservation of natural resources. For more on the role that tourism plays in enhancing international diplomacy, our guest today is the Honorable Minister of Tourism and Hospitality Industry, Engineer Walter Mzembi.
Honorable Minister, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Tourism can be viewed as a code of dressing for a country, and it is said that you are what you wear. How is Zimbabwe dressed?
Well, tourism is the manifestation of courtship. When you are courting a girl or a lady, you wear your best. You don your best apparel. And that is simply what we are in tourism. We are the window of the country.
So what is the tourism industry doing to enhance relations between Zimbabwe and other countries?
Well, at a very early stage in the life of the inclusive government, when I got appointed by President Mugabe to be minister, his parting shot to me after giving me my appointment letter was that go and be creative. I was very sure at that juncture that it would take us time to reconnect Zimbabwe politically. We still haven't managed to achieve that, especially with Europe and the United States of America. But he allowed me and the sector to swim in the deep end so that we would remain the bridge that connects people to people, even as we were trying to find each other politically. So it doesn't surprise that tourism actually gets the endorsement ahead of political processes in the country, that it gets in the form of this Best Tourism Destination Awards, Favorite Cultural Destination, and even a personal honor for the minister is academician for the European Council on Tourism. It is because we have remained engaged, and tourism globally has never dropped President Mugabe for anything that politics dropped him for. In the beginning of 2000, they remained upholding him to the extent that by 2013, he became the 29th signatory to the global Golden Book on Tourism, which in itself is a manifestation of state commitment to supporting tourism. As it stands today, Zimbabwe is in the cockpit of international tourism. We are in the presidency, co-presidency of the UNWTO after hosting successfully the 20th session. We are the chairperson for the Commission for Africa. We are also in the presidency of the Africa Travel Commission, Africa Travel Association, in itself the largest continental association promoting inter-Africa trade, tourism trade between nation states, but more importantly between the United States and Africa. And it doesn't surprise that, notwithstanding what may be sold out there as frosted relations between Zimbabwe and the United States, the USA itself constitutes our single biggest source market for Zimbabwean tourism, followed collectively by Europe. And these are our detractors, but their people have ignored political signals to continue to walk this bridge back and forth between their capitals and our Harare and our other destinations in the country.
Honorable Minister, you spoke about Zimbabwe being awarded the world's best tourism destination, but some people don't agree, like the European Union ambassador. What's your comment on that?
Well, the European Union ambassador, fortunately, I had an opportunity to talk to him directly after the awarding of these accolades to the country. And I asked him very simple questions. First and foremost, I narrated to him that were these awards coming from Boko Haram in Nigeria? Were they coming from Al-Qaeda or from the Ku Klux Klan? No. Were they coming from the devil himself? No. They are coming from a development or tourism agency. And that is as it should be, because we don't award destination awards on each other at political level. We do that through bilateral protocols, memorandum of understanding, which I have appended my signature to between Zimbabwe and on behalf of Zimbabwe with many countries in the world, meaning that they politically endorse us as a safe and peace and secure destination, tourism destination. But at a people-to-people level, there are people who constitute themselves into developmental agencies that place awards on destinations, and it is done on behalf of the people. And as long as they are authoritative enough in the context of the European Council on Tourism, we will receive those awards, because they are not coming from Satan. They are coming from people that are professionally and authoritatively recognized. Secondly, I asked him if he was in disagreement with the citations on the 3 awards, and he said he was not in disagreement. So I said, so what are you in disagreement with? And ultimately, I think it boils down to politics and the desire by politicians to come ahead of anybody else to endorse destinations, then commanding other sectors to follow. You will be aware that Europe has been singing this song about Zimbabwe coming back in November. They are talking about this political timetable of endorsing Zimbabwe back into the EU fold in November. So in November, we are supposed to be born again, politically, according to the Europeans, and then we get confirmed, if I use the Roman Catholic parlance, then get confirmed in February when they do their sittings. I'm very familiar with the structure and processes of the EU myself, having been head of delegation to the ACP-EU European Parliament for 4 years. I led that from our parliament here. So I'm politically competent, perhaps more competent than the ambassador himself in terms of those processes. So I'm very sure about what is taking place, that politics does not want any other sector to sprint ahead of their own endorsements in November and February. And they're saying, oh, stay put until we tell you that these guys are now good for business. But we don't operate like that in tourism. We are an authority in ourselves, a peace sector. And this is why in 2009, well ahead of all these other processes, Europe itself removed travel advisories on Zimbabwe and gave us a clean bill of health by June 2009. And today, I can tell you in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe enjoys the cleanest bill of health in terms of travel advisories. And that was done by Europe, it was done by the United States. I did visits to the US State Department, and I sold them this message, that it doesn't matter how restrained relations are between political states, but we should never impose sanctions on travel on our people. And that message was understood. And this is why we have America in the top notch of arrivals into this country.
Join us after the break as we get into the second segment of the Diplomatic Encounter. Welcome back to the second segment of the Diplomatic Encounter, where today we've got the pleasure of talking to the Minister of Tourism and Hospitality Industry. He's Dr. Walter Mzembi. Honorable Minister, before the break, we were talking about the European Union not endorsing the award that you got for being the world's best tourism destination. Does it mean that the Europeans are divided?
Well, it's a metamorphosis of the European Union from the one that imposed sanctions on us at the beginning of the new millennium. It is no longer the same in 2014. It has embraced in its fold former Eastern European countries, Central, Southern, who are more ideologically aligned to us, the likes of Romania, Serbia, and others. You would not expect them to be frog-marched or commanded in the manner that the core Western European Union would want to do in terms of political time framing on when to accept Zimbabwe back into the fold and so forth. So that's basically why they are sprinting, because they don't see what wrong we have done. And in fact, this meltdown on sanctions is largely driven by this new membership of the Eastern and Southern and Central Bloc, who ideologically are much more aligned to our thinking than the old West, for lack of a better word. You have to read it in the context of geopolitics. The old Cold War divide is coming back. You can see the happenings in Russia, in Ukraine, and other countries related to that crisis. It tells you that there is something happening in Europe that basically speaks in our favor in terms of people now rediscovering their ideological souls and aligning themselves to our founding principles as a nation. And it doesn't surprise, therefore, that you would find Romania, the Romanian-based and Bucharest-based ECTT actually coming to Zimbabwe to endorse us, as it were, because we have a shared history, as President Mugabe put it on the day of the reception of the awards, when he was warmly embracing the president of the awards themselves, Professor Karagia, and chatting to him and reminiscing about the good old times when we were marching together. But what gives a lot of fire to some of this criticism is the division within and amongst us. I'm obviously didn't get here eating ice cream or lollipops. I am obviously aware of the push and support that some of these ambassadors get from our systems, exploiting our own divide within and amongst ourselves, and basically trying to discredit things that should otherwise be assisting us in terms of the Brand Zimbabwe project. So I would hope that we don't continue to communicate in parables within and amongst us and assisting the neo-colonialistic agenda that is sometimes pervaded by some of these ambassadors.
Still on European Union, 3 months ago you were inducted into the London's Speakers Bureau. Can you also comment on that?
Well, this is something that I haven't obviously shared with the nation, that Minister Mzembi was admitted into the London Speakers Bureau. It makes me perhaps the only Zimbabwean in that bureau, and automatically by extension in the Johannesburg Bureau. I was listed as an international and motivational speaker on 3 or 4 areas that include governance, Africa, politics, and tourism. And I'm on call to give motivational speeches and presentations internationally from the London Speakers Bureau. It's a great honor, but at the same time, it is also confirmation, rather, of what the ECTT has already done. I recently got awarded a doctorate from Mexico in recognition of the work that we achieved. And this is why I asked the European ambassador to say that, is he in agreement or disagreement with the citation of the ECTT? And he said he's not in disagreement. So I said, then the chapter is closed.
And you also spoke of supporting the work of neo-colonialists. What is our media doing to maybe...
I think by and large it drives that agenda. We have a very, very poisonous editorial atmosphere in the country. And I think the president has reinforced that statement in recent days and weeks. And would like a media that communicates brand Zimbabwe. I noticed recently that in the recent cabinet reshuffle or cabinet deployments in South Africa, President Zuma actually moved brand South Africa into the communications ministry. The essence of that is really that a brand needs amplification. Once you have done all the technical work around its 6 pillars that include governance, investment in immigration, tourism, arts, culture and heritage, people, and so forth, you need positive amplification of that brand. And it is a function of the spin that comes from the media itself on how they would like their country understood and consumed by other polities and other stakeholders outside there. We talk branding because we seek endorsement of it from external players. Branding, if you endorse yourself, is not good enough. You only raise brand equity when external stakeholders say you are good for business. And this is why communication becomes critical. So the editorial line that you take as a country in communicating your positives more than the negatives becomes super critical in the communication of a brand. And unfortunately, in the country today, we are fed with the agendas that trivialize who we are as a people. I can't understand how we can spend a whole week with Baba Jukwa commanding front page, with factional news commanding front page, personalities around factions commanding front page. And I think the people of Zimbabwe are tired of that garbage. They would like to consume more developmental stuff that feeds their souls, that gives them hope. And I don't think what we do today through our papers, individually and collectively, inspires hope and tells our people that the next day will be better than yesterday.
Why do you think the media behaves in this way?
Partly it's exposure. I think it's also a function of exposure. We have people that were graduates that were churning out of institutions locally who are not exposed to what really should be driving national agendas. And to the extent that they think that gossip columns, the Baba Jukwas, like I mentioned, Bishop Lazarus, and all other funny columns that we read in the press should be driving the national agenda to the extent where it trivializes who we are as a people. I think we must be excused from that nonsense.
Food for thought for our media. Join us after the break for the third and final segment of the Diplomatic Encounter. Welcome back to the third and final segment of the Diplomatic Encounter, where today we're having an interesting as well as informative talk with the Honorable Minister of Tourism and Hospitality Industry, Dr. Walter Mzembi. Coming closer to home, Honorable Minister, are the people, the ordinary Zimbabweans, part of the tourism action?
Yeah, to a very large extent, ordinary people become part of tourism action, to the extent that governments are able to raise middle classes that can afford products. And I'll give you an example of China's recent escapades. It's raising of a middle class to the tune of 300 million people. And it has manifested itself now, expressed itself through China becoming the world's top or biggest spender in tourism at 140 billion. With 98 million of them traveling outbound every year. And China is set, obviously, to outpace the rest of the world in this regard because they've managed to raise a middle class. So going forward, even with us here in Zimbabwe, our ability to raise a middle class, because we now have top end and bottom end, a very small class of rich people and a very wide base of the pyramid of very, very poor people who cannot afford our products. So we must incentivize demand. How are we going to do it? We are proposing a civil service incentive travel scheme, which we have already developed and passed on to the employer, the Civil Service Commission, to make sure that our civil servants, those who cannot afford, are afforded at least a holiday to go and distress once a year. We are also pushing a school tourism product, which I'm glad President aptly captured through his instruction to minister in this sector on the Know Your Country campaign, Know Your Zimbabwe campaign, which we will very soon table before cabinet and subsequently launch. Because the best ambassador of any country is its citizenry. You can't excel a country without beginning that charity at home. And this is why this exercise would also extend itself even to the diaspora, because that is where our middle class is now residing. It is in orbit. Those that can afford to spend on Zimbabwe are in orbit in the diaspora. So we want to make sure that we attract them back to the center, which is to their country, and incentivize them in the same context. So it is a function of affordability. And the government must drive a policy that must deliberately price products preferentially to the Zimbabwean. Okay, and we must do that off-peak seasons when we are not very busy. We don't want to make our hotels continue to register 10-15% occupancy when they could be filled up with domestic tourists. Another major factor that is going to drive domestic tourism is religious tourism in itself. You saw recently our Judgment Night commanded 150,000 people. We're working on other projects that will put 2 million people in one place worshiping. But they will be spending in hotels, they will be feeding, they will be drinking water, and that in itself will be captured as tourism expenditure. But a more recent and very interesting example is the biggest street part now in Southern Africa, our own Harare International Carnival. I would hope that going forward into future editions, we can command upwards of 2 million people on the streets. We think, and we really think that we're at about 1.5 million people on the streets of Harare, expressing themselves in a joyous mood. But we must capture this at policy level to an extent where it becomes brand Zimbabwe in a street party. Okay, so every part of your country, activities, social, economic, even political to a large extent, can be captured in this street party, people celebrating their diversity, but in a joyous and happy atmosphere. And if we can't deliver happiness to our people, then we're not good for business. You can have diamonds, gold, and other mineral endowments. If they don't bring a cheer on people's faces, then they are not good for us.
Dr. Mzembi, maybe to just go back a little bit, Professor Anthony Karigia, president of the ECTT, said, open quote, the successful organization of this world event, the UNWTO, in spite of the huge logistic and economic challenges, proves without doubt the capacity of Zimbabwe to organize world-level events, close quote. So do you see Zimbabwe hosting maybe a world event like the World Cup?
Well, if you recall, post-World Cup 2010, I shouted my voice hoarse on the need for Zimbabwe to start thinking big. And I meant that on the back of the then famous Zimbabwe-Brazil match, which we managed to bring into our own backyard here, notwithstanding the prophets of doom who were saying this man must be crazy. How can he ever imagine that he would bring Brazil here? We've done so many things here with all these voices trying to pull us back, including this event, the bestowment of these awards. There was a lot of detractor voices here from within and outside, including the European Union and even some of our colleagues that I work with. But it didn't stop us. You don't stop when the dog is barking at the moon. Does the moon stop moving? So we look ahead, we fix our eyes on the big picture. And the big picture is that we have already brought Brazil to play Zimbabwe, and it happened before a 70,000 colorful crowd. We have enough stadia in this country to host a few matches, but we should not be greedy. We should not copy the 2010 South African model where they arrogated themselves all the matches when they promised us earlier on that this would be spread across the region. If we bid tomorrow for World Cup, it would include stadia in South Africa, it would include stadia in Mozambique, in Zambia, Botswana, and the region can actually put forward a regional bid anchored by its regional infrastructure, as opposed to unitary infrastructure that you may find in one country or the other. So yes, we have the capacity. We have the capacity to lead the bid. We have the capacity to host as much as 1 million spectators that come for matches. And just for your information, if we could host 1.5 million people in Robert Mugabe Street, what stops us from hosting 1.5 million spectators in the SADC region? for a World Cup.
Any last words to the people of Zimbabwe?
My last word is really to the media. And I speak to the media because I think they are drawing us back in terms of our advances in repositioning brand Zimbabwe. Please don't reduce Zimbabwe to a comic book or a comical experience where we can spend a whole week just seeing the same headlines about policemen being beaten by a Mapo story, and it is fed to us daily, front page, until the following Sunday. We have far much more serious issues to be communicating to our country. We have Zim Asset, which we really should popularize and make it our Bible of economic transformation and liberation. And this is what we should be unpacking instead of getting the hilarious stuff that really does not assist us. We want it in certain sections of the papers, but it shouldn't certainly command the front page space for a whole week. Otherwise, we're really trivializing our agenda. In fact, we are making a laughing stock of our literary prowessness, where we claim that we are 93% literate. Yes, literate, but certainly not learned in some of those key areas.
Zimbabwe is indeed a beautiful, beautiful nation, and we thank the Ministry of Tourism and Hospitality Industry for raising our country's flag high. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode of the Diplomatic Encounter, and for your views and comments, please don't hesitate to link up with us, and you can do so via our contact details, which are now showing on your screens. Also, you can interact with us via our Facebook page, which is the Diplomat Zimbabwe. Have a pleasant viewing.